listeners, my name is Cliff Ratza. I'm the author of two ongoing series of novels, the Lightning Brain series and its sequel, the Keeper series. And in addition to being an author and a writing coach, I teach at universities and have a consulting business. If you would like to learn more about me, my books, or my writing coach activities, please contact Prime Solutions using the lightningbrainseries.com website. Now, I try to make videos that I think authors and writers and most people might enjoy listening to. And I try to cover material that you might not see on the news or hear in other YouTube or similar videos. I figure that if I can't find a different point of view, there's no reason for me to add something that you can find elsewhere. Well, the title of this video is The Revolt Against the Masses. Is mass society okay today? I imagine that most of you have heard the term mass society, which is often used to characterize any society that is rather thoughtless and consumer consumption driven. Mass society theory was based on the thesis that modernity had severely eroded social fabric. In mass society, individuals are at once subsumed in the social totality and estranged from one another. Individuals belonging to the mass are detached or atomized. The history of this notion and the theory of mass society has been explored from its ancient roots in Greek and Roman political thought about the many versus the few until modern times. Theories about the plebes, demagoguery, and revolutionary crowds in thinkers such as Plato, Cicero, and Hobbes are shown to bear upon later conceptions. The modern ideal of a leveled, homogeneous society developed by de Tocqueville in the 19th century, combined with fears about the masses expressed both by crowd psychologists such as Freud and conservative writers, are seen as the precursors of the contemporary mass society conception. The diverse ramifications of the mass society conception into the contemporary theories of mass culture, mass politics, the homogenization whew, get that straight, of society, mass consumption, and the depersonalization of modern human beings. All this has been reported. A guy by the name of Marcuse, his one-dimensional man, and other closely related interpretations have been analyzed. The widespread persistence of the mass society concept in contemporary thought, often subsumed into other interpretations of modernity, is a topic of socio-political theorists today. Whew! Let me catch my breath. I found that good summary in a well-respected analyst's article. So, let's trace through how this by now cliche-like trope originated and how it applies in our postmodern world. And to do this, I will use my usual syntopical comparative analysis of a number of appropriate subject matter experts, books or videos, from people like John Kerry regarding his book, Intellectuals and the Masses, Fred Siegel in his book, The Revolt Against the Masses, Roger Scruton, his books and videos regarding the political right and left, Eric Hoffer and Eric Fromm's views of the middle class, and Thomas Sowell's books and discussions regarding economics and inequality. And to begin, let's get our terminology straight. Well, what is liberalism? Liberalism, a political doctrine that takes protecting and enhancing the freedom of the individual to be the central problem of politics. Liberals typically believe that government is necessary to protect individuals from being harmed by others. But they also recognize that government itself can pose a threat to liberty. It came into being with the Enlightenment and the French and American revolutions. It champions freedom and liberty, democracy and solidarity among the population, justice and fairness and individual rights. We can call all this classical liberalism. But what is progressive liberalism? This refers to our government's push to correct the problems too much liberalism can cause. And historically, that led to the Great Depression. A bigger government must protect the people with social safety nets for income, health care, and equality. It is sometimes referred to as the welfare state. What is a liberal left? Think of it as the more extreme reaches of progressive liberalism. It is sometimes referred to as the academic or intellectual left. And what is the radical right? Well, it is the more extreme reaches of those who oppose the welfare state. They support the Libertarian Party. Okay, what is neoliberalism and neoconservatism? They're the more centrist segments of the population who fall closer to the center than to the extremes. And what is the middle class? It is that segment of the population that holds jobs, giving them enough money and satisfaction, values family and classical liberty beliefs and institutions, and wants to get along with others. You can find more elaborate and sophisticated definitions, but they'll condense to what I just stated. So let's use mine for the time being. And now let's trace a historical timeline for how all the above developed. Of course, it goes all the way back to prehistoric caveman times, when man first clustered into tribes that gave them better odds for surviving. It worked, and over hundreds of thousands of years, civilizations emerged. And with civilizations came a hierarchical social organization that helped them function better. They were based on family fealty and the hierarchy of wisdom. Think Confucianism in China, which also had the very first bureaucracy and meritocracy, or democracy. And for that, think the Golden Age of Greece. Or religion. Think Judeo-Christianity and Islamism. But during the Dark Ages and then the Middle Ages, a kingly class system came along. Kings and royalty, soldiers and knights to protect the king, burghers and tradespeople to make things, and serfs and slaves who had little say in their lives. The kings and the religious leaders often fought, and when they did, the people lost. And because life was so difficult in those trying times, populations couldn't grow very fast. Life was essentially a fight for survival. But the wisest scholars thought up a better way to live. And from their ideas came the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Power to the people, forms of government. Progress, prosperity, free markets and capitalism. All this made for a better way of life, better way of living. Populations grew, and nation states looked for better ways to get along. But those who used to have the power, the erstwhile ruling class supported by intellectuals from academies and religions, resented the growing mass of people. This run through history takes us up to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So now let's summarize what John Carey, Fred Siegel, Roger Scruton, Thomas Sowell, and their cohorts have to say. First, to John Carey and his book, The Intellectuals of the Masses, subtitled Pride and Prejudice Among the Literary Intelligentsia, 1889 to 1939. John Carey was the Merton Professor of English at Oxford until he retired in 2001, and he is still an emeritus professor. His book comes in two parts. The first contains various themes, and the second offers case studies of several writers. And here is a summary of its themes. The Industrial Revolution increased the size of population, along with scientific thinking and rational thought. Public education expanded so people could read and know enough to function in a world that now favored mind over brute force. People liked having freedom and free markets and democracy that gave them a voice to the majority. And the intellectuals despised the masses and considered the common man to be an unwashed, unanointed, crass thing that only wanted to consume things to satisfy their tasteless appetites. The intellectuals consider themselves to be the superior, they consider themselves to be superior artistically and intellectually, and appointed themselves to be the guardians of society against the pressures of mass culture. So, particularly in the artistic arena, they made literary works and paintings deliberately hard to understand. Only they knew what was written. Only they could tell the masses what these works of art mean. In literature, examples of this are the novels written by Thomas Hardy, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, and poets like Yeats and T.S. Eliot. As the 19th century moved on, the ruling classes, from whom intellectuals were exclusively drawn from in those days, the ruling classes began to be aware that the masses, for want of a better term, were rapidly growing in power and influence. What was more, they were being taught to read, and this was deeply alarming. Who could say what ideas they might pick up? A revolution in France was bad enough, but what if it spread? Well, a widespread and deep-seated fear of the masses began to percolate through the intelligentsia, and from there into the political arena of government. So let's proceed to Fred Siegel's book, The Revolt of the Masses, How Liberalism Has Undermined the Middle Class. Fred Siegel is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, a think tank which focuses on urban policy and politics. He remains a contributor to numerous publications, including the New York Post. He's supposed to have a weekly column there. The New Republic, the Atlantic Monthly, and Commonwealth. He has also taught at Cooper Union and St. Francis Colleges in New York City. Well, in his book, he says the past has served as a political advisor to several political figures in New York City. Let me correct that. In the past, he has served as a political advisor to several political figures in New York City, most notably former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. And Fred is the author of several books, including The Prince of the City and The Genius of American Life and The Future Once Happened Here. I've read the book, The Revolt of the Masses, and here are my thoughts regarding it. What we think of as liberalism today, that's the top and bottom coalition we associate with President Obama, began not with progressivism or the New Deal, but rather in the wake of post-World War I disillusionment with American society. The author explores the inner life of American liberalism over the past 90 years, beginning with liberalism's foundation writers and thinkers, such as Herbert Croly, Randolph Bourne, H.G. Wells, Sinclair Lewis, and H.L. Mencken, who despised the new worlds of mass production, mass politics, and mass culture. These liberals sought to establish a true aristocracy that would serve as a counterpoint to the debasements of modern society. It was then in the seminal 1920s that the strong strain of snobbery and contempt for the middle class arose big time. So pervasive today in New York, in New Yorker magazine, the Hamptons, and the Sierra Club, which first defined liberalism. Today's brand of Barack Obama liberalism has gone further, displacing the old Main Street middle class with public sector workers, crony capitalists, and those elite arbiters of style and taste. Siegel calls them the liberal gentry. This book, The Revolt Against the Masses, explains how all this came to be and why liberals continue to insist they act on behalf of the best interests of the middle class, even if the middle class doesn't know it. And here are some closing comments made in a book review regarding what Siegel had to say. Liberal intellectuals' dislike for the habits of the American majority drove them to take certain positions on cultural and political matters. And those positions, Mr. Siegel argues, resulted in the near death of high culture, the elevation of taxpayer strangling public sector unions, and a presidential administration willing to steamroll America's middle class to achieve its purposes. Another book review concludes by saying, all this amounts to a sampling of left-wing derision. The contempt has produced results in the political sphere, of course, a coalition led by academics and bankrolled by Hollywood and Wall Street is happy to impose healthcare reform on the masses despite having no firm grasp of what it will cost or how much damage it will do, all while heaping government largesse on liberal cronies in the green energy sector. Mr. Siegel has done a terrific job of turning a long chapter of intellectual history, much of it containing dense arguments about government policy and cultural theory, into a narrative with forward drive. The book lacks a happy ending, but stories about men who deify their own intelligence usually do not have happy endings. Not very cheery. Well, not a Roger Scruton. Sir Roger Scruton was an English philosopher and writer who specialized in aesthetics and political philosophy, particularly in the furtherance of traditionalist conservative views. When he died 2 years ago, he was considered the most thoughtful and eloquent spokesperson explaining why politics should turn away from neoliberal and back to a more useful neoconservative view. I've watched several videos and read some of his books that are pretty convincing if you have the time and are ready to concentrate on what he says. Now to Thomas Sowell. He's an American economist, historian, social theorist, and senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He is a National Humanities Medal recipient for innovative scholarship, which incorporated history, economics, and political science. He contends that much of neoliberal politics has co-opted civil rights, racial and sexual identity issues, turning them into puffed up self-promotion of the political elites and their accomplices. Please listen to some of his YouTube videos to hear more than my brief summary that I've given. And I'll end with some thoughts from Eric Hoffer and Erich Fromm. Eric Hoffer is a rarity. He is a self-educated scholar. He claims to have had no formal education, no formal schooling, as well as the novelty of a philosopher with a working class background. All this made Hoffer into a sort of popular folk hero. He continued as a San Francisco dock worker until 1967, completing his books between assignments. He had great respect and confidence in the middle class. Erich Fromm was a German social psychologist, psychoanalyst, sociologist, and humanistic philosopher, as well as democratic socialist. He was a German Jew who fled the Nazi regime and settled in the United States. He believed that freedom was an aspect of human nature that we either embrace or escape from. He observed that embracing our freedom of will was healthy, whereas escaping freedom through the use of escape mechanisms was the root of psychological conflicts. As such, he was and still is considered a right-leaning liberal. When you listen to the news today, you can hear echoes of what I have just summarized, and they always reverberate louder as elections approach. And as you might have just heard, the Supreme Court might overturn the now decades-old Roe v. Wade abortion decision. That and the Ohio election primaries might tell us a lot, but maybe not, depending on who you listen to. So I leave it for you to decide if our government is beginning to show more respect for its great mass of people. And I'll end with a poem I found that is dedicated to all Americans. It's titled The Dawn Patrol, a Labor Day Salute. And here it is. Swish, swish, it's the farmer who is up and now about. Clank, clank sounds the factory worker, turning products out. Crush, crush, it's the commuter on his trek to work each day. Rush, rush goes the driver, passing him along the way. Welcome to the Dawn Patrol. They're up before the sun. Like pieces of a puzzle, they fit to get work done. They number in the millions. If you knew each one, you'd see they're experts in the roles they play and share common destiny. Their collective will's unstoppable. They have an energy that says all things are possible. As a people, always free. So when the day is over and our daily bread's been won, I give thanks to solidarity and happy to be among. And that'll do it for this video. If it sparked your interest, I encourage you to watch more YouTube videos to talk about what I just touched on. Then you can decide for yourself if we the people are getting the respect that we deserve. So thank you for listening, and bye-bye until next time.